Hello. This episode of Writing Notes is going to take you through one of the basic paragraph structures found throughout U.S. rhetoric. That's the claim, evidence, interpretation structure. Now basically, you've got this sort of spatial diagram here. You start out with a claim. You may want to see my video on thesis statements to get a bit more information about a claim. But basically the claim is a small, a limited scale argument that you want to make within a specific paragraph or a specific section. We'll talk more about this in just a minute. Then you have evidence. Evidence is the stuff that supports the claim that you're making. The data that you have backing up your main argument. This can take a lot of different forms. We'll talk more about these in just a bit. And then you have interpretation. This is probably the most challenging part for most students because they really struggle with making clear how these things connect. So basically your interpretation, to try and clarify this just a little bit, basically your interpretation is the work that you do to explain why your evidence supports your claim. So let's talk in a bit more detail about these three things, right? So let's start with the claim. The claim, again, is the main argument that you want to make in a paragraph or a section. This is almost always going to connect back to your thesis in some way. So again, your thesis is the main argument that your paper as a whole is making. Your claim is a section claim or paragraph claim in which you say, this is a specific component of the overall argument that I'm now going to prove for you. Okay. Evidence, you get a lot of different kinds of evidence. One thing that I find with a lot of my students is that when they hear the word evidence, they immediately think statistics. You're not limited to statistics. You've got a lot of different kinds of evidence. Statistics is one of them. Data, like hard sciences kind of data, is one of them. But then you've also got things like theories, opinions, ideas, concepts, philosophies. So, for instance, for those of us who work in English, we work a lot in theories. So, Michel Foucault's theory of the panopticon, for instance, may inform the way that we read a specific novel. We're not dealing with hard data in this case. There's no sort of, there are this many prisons or whatever, there are this many cameras or whatever it is. That's not really what we're interested in. So evidence is much broader, or maybe much broader, than a lot of students tend to think of it as. And then interpretation, again, this is the really challenging part, not because students don't know how to interpret data, but because it's very difficult to put that interpretation on the page. One of the reasons it's so difficult to interpret on the page is because a lot of times as a writer, and this happens even with the most experienced and advanced writers, a lot of times the connections make so much sense in your head that it becomes very difficult to put them on paper. So really what you need to do with the interpretation section is, even if it feels very basic, just say, these are the reasons why this evidence supports the claim that I've already made. So you get this basic structure, this claim, evidence, interpretation structure. And you can complicate it in more specific ways. You can do claim, evidence, interpretation, evidence, interpretation. There's what I think of as a fairly bad metaphor for the claim, evidence, interpretation structure, which is called the hamburger method, where the claim is your top bun, the meat is the evidence, and then the bottom bun is the interpretation. And the only reason I mention it is because you can think of this claim, evidence, interpretation as a sort of double-decker burger. Anyway, so the reason that this claim, evidence, interpretation structure is actually a pretty good one is because it's solid. If you hit all three of these points in a specific section, you will make a fairly convincing argument for the thing that you're trying to prove. Now, I want to give you guys an example of this, and this is from a paper that I wrote about 5 years ago when I was in my master's program, and this is about teaching. So here it is. As one of the few, if not the only, courses that virtually every college student takes, freshman English has been an intensely contested battleground recently, especially since the 1970s. The freshman writing course, more than any other single class, forms, quote, how our nation's 2.2 million first-year college students read, think, and write, and how they'll think about reading and writing for the rest of their lives, end quote. And that's from Lynn Bloom. What is read and discussed in such an influential course should obviously be a subject for critical debate, as various groups and critics try to ensure the best education for future scholars. Now, what we've got here is the claim, evidence, interpretation structure working on a very basic three-sentence level. So the claim is, as one of the few, if not the only, courses that virtually every college student takes, freshman English has been an intensely contested battleground, especially since the 1970s. This is the argument that this section is trying to make, is that we've been having a lot of debate about the nature of first-year composition, the way that first-year composition courses are structured, the purpose of first-year composition, and so on and so on. And then we've got the meat, and this is where we get into the quote from Lynn Bloom. So Lynn Bloom is a composition theorist, a pedagogy theorist. She's done a lot of writing and a lot of theorizing about teaching first-year composition. So I've pulled a quote from her where she is making the same kind of argument that I'm making. And then the interpretation here, and this actually connects on to the next section as well, is where I say, what is read and discussed in such an influential course should obviously be a subject of critical debate, as various groups and critics try to ensure the best education for future scholars. So what I'm doing here is I'm interpreting this evidence. I'm interpreting the fact that there has been such a debate going on. I'm saying this is why there's been so much debate going on. So the claim in this paragraph isn't tremendous. Like, I'm gonna tell you guys that right now. This is not the best claim that I've ever written. The evidence is pretty solid. The interpretation is really what's working here. Because I'm saying, not only is this an important thing that's going on, I'm connecting it to a larger concern in the paper, which is that we should be working to structure our first-year composition courses to give students the best education possible. So again, the claim, evidence, interpretation structure, it gives you a very basic way of moving through paragraphs or moving through sections, but it gives you a very reliable way of moving through paragraphs or moving through sections. So again, if you can hit that claim, this is what I'm going, this is the argument that I'm making, the evidence, here's the data, here's the proof, and then the interpretation, here's why this proves it, and here's how it connects to the larger concerns. You should structure a very strong section.